Here we go. All right. Welcome to In the Know with CaT Bobino. Today, my extra special guest is marine biologist Paul Cox. And Paul is the CEO of Shark Trust, which is in the UK. So he is joining us all the way from the United Kingdom. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Thank you, Kat. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Very good. What's your weather like over there? Is it better than ours here?
Well, I live in California, so it's pretty nice. I
Yes.
think our high today is 58 Fahrenheit, and it's blue skies actually right now. How about you?
Crikey,
What's the
yeah.
weather like where you are?
Yeah, well, it's the middle of winter. It's it's all we've got to make us feel better is Christmas trees and just the prospect of a couple of weeks off for Christmas.
Oh yeah, I have a counterpart in Delaware, the state of Delaware, and she said it was 19 degrees. So it is a stark difference here in the states as well, from one end to the other. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself. What is Shark Trust? We'll start there.
Okay.
What is Shark Trust?
So yeah, Shark Trust is a non-profit. We work on shark conservation, and we do really broad range of things. Everything from kind of public engagement, working with communities, getting people excited about sharks, getting people to love sharks. We have a couple of citizen science projects that we kind of get people to get involved in collecting data for us about sharks. Um, and then we do a lot more work on the conservation side. So we do species conservation planning, and we do a lot of policy work on fisheries, which is kind of the key problem for sharks is overfishing. So we do a lot of work in that area to try and push fisheries towards sustainable management.
Okay. Well, that's amazing. What got you into sharks? Why sharks?
I don't know really. I mean, it was so I spent the first part of my working life in my 20s. I worked in a bank. I worked in investment banking, and
Mm,
had no. I mean, look, I meet a lot of people in my world who are like, born with a snorkel in their mouth and just, been diving since they were 3 years old, and that's not me at all. I was really late to the game, so in my sort of probably mid 20s, I started getting interested. I went snorkeling a couple of times, started learned to scuba dive, um, and it just bit me. It's just something that I was really interested in, and so I decided to give up what I was doing in banking and to go to university and study for an undergraduate in marine biology. So I did that when I was 30. And then I just kind of worked in this field for the last 25 years. And my first job was in an aquarium. So I spent a lot of time. I was kind of like full of science and full of information about all these animals that we were surrounded by in this aquarium, and I kind of learned really quickly about how to bore people to tears with all the information that you've got. So I kind of had to learn really quickly on how to kind of engage people, how to get people interested, how to meet people on their level, just by talking about the animals that were around us in the exhibitions. And that just got me really, really interested. And I got particularly interested in sharks because obviously they're kind of key animals in aquarium exhibitions. And there was just like a real diversity of attitudes towards sharks and a real diversity of kind of understanding of where sharks were and what the challenges they face. So it's just kind of built from there. There was no like plan. It was never like I didn't sit down and write a plan and this is what I want to do. It's just kind of I've ended up this way. And so after 15 years in the aquarium, I saw a job come up for CEO of the Shark Trust, and I just thought, yeah, I want to. That's what I want to do. That's really where I want to be. So that's what I've been doing for 10 years.
that is amazing. And I want to go back to what you said in the very beginning, which was you were an investment banker. So did you go to college to work in the bank? Did you like start off that way?
No, no, not at all. I mean, you'll get a kind of sense of. I just kind of fell into that as well. If I'm really honest, so I I found myself when I finished my kind of, I guess we call it A levels. You call it kind of I don't know, grade school or something. I'm not sure what you call it. Anyway,
Okay.
so I was 18. I left school. I didn't really have a plan. I bounced around doing a variety of things. I kind of worked bars, and I worked in restaurants, and I kind of did all of that. And then I ended up in a place called Sheffield, which is in the north of the UK. And in the winter there, it's cold. It's really cold. And I ended up working in this job, where I was basically stacking products into the back of a van, and they were all frozen. So I was working in a freezer, putting stuff into vans, and it was just cold, and I was just miserable. And one of my friends said to me, "Look, I'm working in a bank. It's great. You sit in a nice warm office, and you just do stuff on computers." I just thought, that sounds great. And that was it. I just kind of fell into it, and I got quite into the IT side of it. I got really this was like in the early days of the internet. It's before the internet was really a thing. That's how old I am. But yeah, I just got really into the power of IT, and it really appealed to my logical brain. And so I kind of moved through the bank into a job in IT, into new projects work, and then into the investment side of it. So it just happened, and it was never intentional. But it gave me the confidence to think, do you know what? If I can do something that I'm not interested in, imagine what I could do if I do something I am interested in. That's kind of what prompted me to make the change.
Well, no, I think that is so amazing, because a lot of times our kids are like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And our parents are just maybe pushing them in a certain direction. But it just seems like you were just open-minded. You were like, okay, well, I'm gonna just do this over here, this over here. And eventually, you got into doing a job that, okay, it's banking, I'm warm, I can do it. But it wasn't your passion. And you decided to go back to school at 30. Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, I applaud that. I applaud
Man.
Yeah, people are afraid to start over. People are sometimes afraid of, oh, maybe I'm a little too old for school, or I'm do this. But you found something you were interested in, right? And you decided, hey, I'm going to go back to school.
Yeah,
I think that.
do you know what? It makes studying for something so much easier if you're really motivated, and if you're really and almost like it being a second chance. I think just made me more obsessive, and I drove the rest of my schoolmates mad, because I'd be like the guy at the front after the lectures asking loads of questions, and they were like, "Come on, we want to go to the bar, drinks are up." So yeah, I think it just really I always, when I talk to people about studying, I've got 3 daughters who are at that kind of decision-making age, and I always don't rush into anything. Just find something that you're really passionate about, and it just makes everything else easier, because your motivation comes from within rather than what people are telling you to do.
Yes. I mean, it goes a lot of times. I do this podcast, and I've interviewed quite a lot of people. I think well over 100 people, and no one's path. Well, not no one. Most people's paths are not linear, right? There's ups, downs, sideways, but I think you might be the first person I've talked to who's like, you know what? I did all this first, then went back to school, or then I went to college, and yes, I was the bore in the front of the class asking all the questions, but you learned and you got what you needed from it, right? And so I'm assuming what we call a bachelor's the same thing, or I don't know if it's the same thing in the UK, but you got your bachelor's. Was that it, or did you continue on for a master's?
No, so when I finished my bachelor's, I got my first job in the sector. So this was working in the aquarium, and my first job and working for this is the National Marine Aquarium in the UK, and my first job there was working in their education team. So it was great. It was having come through university and learned all this stuff, I just came out with just I want to just pass this on. I just want to engage people. I want to kind of share my passion for this with other people. So working in education team is brilliant. I just kind of my first job there was just taking kids on day trips around the aquarium and talking to them and trying to fit it in with the school curriculum. And that's where I kind of got started on the STEM stuff. And And then I got that whilst I was doing that, my boss was, when he was actually applying for some, he was applying for some funding to develop an area of the aquarium as a science technology center. And so he said, I really want to I want you to kind of go down the STEM route. And so we agreed for me to do a master's. So I did a master's in science communication. And that really kind of introduced me to the whole world of kind of STEM and how you can communicate effectively, how you can target different audiences, how you evaluate what you've done and kind of build continuous improvement into your communication. And so that was a really great education for me, which I kind of took into the rest of my career at the aquarium, but also I've brought that with me to the Shark Trust and some of the work we do today. So I did that. And then I've also done a little bit later on, not really formal study, but I got involved in a conservation psychology piece. So there was a day in San Diego. I came over to a 5-day workshop over there and learned a little bit about conservation psychology, and then I've kind of integrated that into my science communication thinking. So yeah, I've picked up a lot of stuff along the way.
Yes, that is really cool. And I really want to dive a little bit into the conservation psychology. I don't think that's a term most people hear when they think about conservation. So can you break that down a little bit? Like, what is conservation psychology?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's when I did it, this was like 2013 when I went on this, I don't know what to call it, a retreat, maybe it's called. At the time, it had been around as a concept for maybe 5 years, and they were still saying, oh, it's still emerging. And it's still emerging now. It's not really kind of shown its head, but it's essentially a social science. And there's a couple of different elements to it. One element is about for people working in conservation, understanding the pressures that they're under and being able to kind of, self-analyze and assess and see when you're under stress and so on. But the more important bit of conservation psychology is about how you can use the tools of psychology, which are used by marketing, advertising, businesses use psychology all the time to influence us, to guide what we do and what we buy and what we, who we listen to and so on. And it's kind of using some of those tools within conservation communication so that we can be more effective and more efficient at getting people on board with our messaging. And really, for me, it's about not just, we hear this phrase, raise awareness, when people talk about causes. And for me, it's about not just it's raising awareness and action, and it's moving people from awareness to action. And that's where understanding people's values, their motivations, and how you can affect people's behavior all comes from a kind of psychology background. And then there's kind of research science that you can do in social science approaches that kind of help you to understand the people that you're working with. So yes, it's a really cool discipline. It's really interesting, and I teach a bit of it on a master's course over here at the university, because I just feel it's something that more people working in our sector need to kind of have introduced to them, because it can really move you on from this kind of we need to teach everyone everything in order for them to come on board with our cause, to a more start from the other end. What do I want people to do, and what's the most efficient way of getting to that outcome, and being kind of very clear about the behavior or the difference you want to make, and then work backwards to what you need to do.
I feel like that should be something you're teaching on Zoom, so someone like me can jump on there and be like, oh yes, okay, I like that. So I'm just throwing that out there, maybe a Zoom course.
Yeah, I should do more of it. Yeah.
Yes, because a lot of people don't think about it that way. There's a lot of people who want to be a part of conservation. They see what's happening with climate change. They see what's happening with destruction of forests, destruction of water, and they want to support, but they're not sure how, right? And for me, what I'm understanding is you're making the messaging more clear for those who may have an interest but not sure how to help or don't even know what's happening. And you're educating them on, hey, for example, with sharks and people, the overfishing or dumping things into the water and how it's affecting the sea life or marine life. So
Yeah.
I think that's a really cool thing.
So there's like a classic paper in conservation, like the seminal paper in conservation psychology, which is called "Conservation Means Behavior" by a guy called Wes Schultz, who's based in San Diego, and basically the premise is like all of the conservation issues we face, they're all human problems, right? They're all tied in with humanity and people, and so you have to understand people and be able to work with people in order to solve the conservation problems. You can describe the problem by using biological science and by using the physical sciences, but to challenge the problem and to make a change, you need to engage with people, which is why science, conservation, psychology, and social science is so vital.
Wow. Okay. Good to know. I'm gonna have to look that paper up, and anyone listening should definitely check that paper
It's
out.
quite short.
That's really cool. I mean, one of the things that I often talk to about people in STEM and sharing their stories is, well, here in America, this is going to sound bad and no one come after me, but it's true. The average reading level is third grade, right? So this is someone who might be 8 or 9, but that's the base of the average reading level in America, which means the understanding level is around that age range. And so when you're talking up here about science, or you're talking about up here about STEM or conservation, you miss so many people because they're not there. They don't understand the language or what you're trying to say. So you have to convey it in a different manner, so to speak, for the average person.
Definitely. And that's something that scientists, and this is something I did when I did my science communication, science is particularly good at coming up with language that no one else understands. Like, when you study science, you learn the very specific right word for a particular thing. And then scientists often find it difficult to not use that language because it's so exact. But the guy that I've worked with, we produced a toolkit about a little bit later, like a communication toolkit to talk sharks. And the guy that I worked with on that, he has this phrase, scientists always say it's the right language, but it's not the right language if no one knows what it means. And it's like, right. It's so true. And you've just got to, it's like a noise when you're communicating that disrupts what you're trying to say, because people are like, what is it? What is that word? Yeah. Or even just like, when you see science text and it's like really long sentences with loads of commas, and you have to read it, and then you get halfway through and you're like, hang on, I've got to go back and start again. I've lost my track. Yes. Like all of these things, we are responsible for making ourselves difficult to understand if we don't kind of look at it from the point of view of the person we're talking to, rather than from our own point of view.
I know when I was getting my bachelor's in biology, we had one of my classes was Latin, right? So we had to learn Latin prefixes and words so that we would understand certain terms in science, and especially in like medical terms. All of that stuff, a lot of that stuff is Latin based. And so for someone never taken Latin or doesn't understand Latin base or prefixes, you're just like, what? That just went straight over my head. I don't know what you're talking about.
Say what? Yeah.
And so you have to break it down. You have to be like, yeah, no, what I mean is this. You can't say hemoglobin. You got to be like, okay, red blood cells, the stuff in red blood cells, right? Like, you got to break it down. But I mean, that's really key in like STEM education and sharing what you're doing and how you're doing it. So anyway, I can talk about that forever. We'll go back to you and all the stuff that you've accomplished.
Talk about me more.
Yeah. Right. So 15 years in an aquarium. I mean, tell us
Yeah.
about that. Where did you start and where did you get to at 15 years? And outside of boring people to death about your knowledge of sharks.
Well, I learned not to do that after. So yeah, so I worked within the education team, as I said, to start with. So I was doing like school trips and so on, and we did a lot of work um, on looking at the curriculum. You know that the different age groups are having to deal with at school, and trying to find ways to squeeze marine themes in there, because unbelievably marine stuff just isn't in the curriculum in the UK, and it's probably the same in the US.
I believe so.
And so we were like, how do we, okay, so if marine stuff isn't in there, well, then let's look at habitats. That's in there. So then how can we talk about habitats under the sea compared to habitats? And we found that, it kind of opened people's mind to a different way of looking at things. And they don't have to keep talking about grass and rabbits and foxes kind of thing. Is actually other ways of describing food chains and things. So we did a lot of kind of work on that. And then I got involved in a really interesting European project, which was quite a big funded project, which involved representatives from about 10 different European countries. And the idea was that we were looking at informal learning, and like how people learn in environments like aquariums, museums, science centers, or just how people are learning in everyday life, and how we could make that experience of learning more kind of targeted or channeled into positive outcomes that we're looking for, and also how we could get some of those informal learning techniques into schools, because we knew, and this is what a lot of the research is about. It's like, when people used to come to our aquarium, that they're going to remember what they've learned, and they're going to remember that experience, because not only are they being told stuff, it's in a whole experience. And so their memories are going to last a lot longer, and then you're able to kind of help them to learn a lot more in those kind of environments. There's lots about the techniques that they use in those places the idea was to work with schools. Again, actually, it was in partnership with a place in San Francisco. Actually, so there was a similar project working in California, and we were doing it in Europe, and we were kind of comparing notes and so on and so forth. And so that was really interesting. That was about 2 years of my life working on that, and so I got to go and visit lots of European countries, which is cool, and meet people from all sorts of different cultures. And then and then I kind of did a few different kind of projects of this nature, kind of European projects, learning projects. We did a big pulled together partners in the UK and put together basically a manifesto to the government of the time. I think this is probably about 2011, which was how they could integrate marine and ocean topics into the national curriculum, how they could take ocean literacy, which is again a thing that comes out of the States originally, how they could integrate that into the curriculum. So we did this kind of big advocacy push, and that's still ongoing. The guys that I work with, who still work there, that is an ongoing process of trying to get kind of schools and government to kind of pick up the ocean themes within schools. And then I spent a couple of years doing the curator job. So the curator in an aquarium or in a zoo has you're basically looking after the animals in the exhibits. And so that was a real education for me, learning about something completely different. And the idea was that we were really trying to bring together the education work of the aquarium with what was being displayed. And so everything had a purpose, everything had a reason to be there, and every story that we could pull out of kind of the animals and the interactions that there were, we could kind of bring to our audience. So yeah, I did that for a couple of years, and then my last few years there, I ended up as director of conservation, and so we set up some new conservation projects. So we did a sustainable seafood project, we did a plastics project, we did a climate project, and we started off a seagrass restoration project. So we kind of got these projects. I got some funding in, got these projects off and running, and then this job came up, so I left.
Understandable. I mean, no, I was taking it all in of all the things that you were saying, and some of the things that you were mentioning kind of stuck out, which is the curriculum. And when we're teaching about habitats, and we're in, marine habitats are not a big thing that is taught. However, I'm in California. I went to school on an island called Alameda, and I distinctly remember. Now, this is before the year 2000, so I was in high school before 2000. So yes, I didn't have internet either. But I had a marine biology class, but it was an elective.
Windows XP.
Yeah. It was an elective class, so it wasn't something that everyone had to take, but because we were right on the water, we got to put waders on, go out, get water samples, talk about marine life, and talk about, ecosystems. And we even created our own aquarium with some of the smaller creatures that we got from the bay, which was really cool. And it stuck with me all these years, that particular class, because it was so hands-on and it was so interesting, but it was an elective. It wasn't something that everyone needed to take or have an understanding of what's going on. And so, yeah, so to your point, habitats are the grass, rat, fox type of deal.
Yeah.
It's not, seagrass, sea snails, and the things that, as that goes up on there. So I think that's something that definitely needs more focus on. And I like that.
Definitely. I mean, I think a lot of people still, and I did until I was lucky enough in my mid-20s to kind of start to explore underneath the water. I think a lot of people look at the water and it's just this kind of flat, bluey gray thing that there's stuff that lives in there, but it's sometimes you think peel it back and show people what's underneath. I mean, it's incredible. And all the different habitats, the kelps that you've got in off California coast, these kind of these mega kelps and all the animals that live in amongst them, and all those interactions, that kind of community of animals. It's closed off, I think, for too many people. So when you get the opportunity, we're really lucky, those of us that have had the opportunity to kind of see the other side of it.
I've done like very minimum scuba diving, but I have friends who are scuba divers, and I even interviewed some ladies who have a nonprofit that they are deep sea scuba divers, and they convert old oil rigs into habitats. And to listen to the stories of people who have gone like deep into the ocean and seen these amazing animals and sea life, and like the kelp you mentioned, it's a whole new world. It's a completely different world under there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I was recently talking to a good friend of mine about microplastics, and you brought up plastics and what's going on in the ocean. And I always like to tell people, you do know there's like Trash Island, and it's bigger than Texas. It's humongous, and it's just trash, and people don't understand throwing trash in the water. It kills sea life. It causes major issues. I mean, but okay, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. But can you tell us a little bit more about like the plastics and what you guys were researching with the plastics?
Yeah, I mean, what we were looking at, because we worked with some partners at the university in Plymouth, where we're based, and they'd done a lot of work on plastics, and then we were looking at kind of some of the things that we could do, bringing that conservation psychology into it, some of the things that we could do around trying to help people move away from plastics, and trying to work within the community, within the city that we're in, and seeing if we could kind of change not so much individual behaviors, but change behaviors of the way that the city was organized. I mean, and this seems ridiculous now, thinking back that, this was probably 13 years ago. And I was going around town saying, we need water fountains. We need to move people away from plastic bottles. We need places where people can fill up water. And people are like, no, that's not possible. You can't do that. Right. And now, almost everywhere you go, you can fill up your bottle somewhere. So I think, you know, it has moved on a long way. Yeah, and it's just that kind of moving people's mindset towards thinking about this thing and where it's going to go when I've finished with it. And as you kind of started off this conversation talking about the microplastics thing, and that you know, you think about the island, the garbage patch, and you kind of envisage you know, big lump like plastic cups and, you know, big lumps of plastic, and there is that. But the really kind of the really dreadful thing is that, you know, it breaks down, it breaks down, it breaks down, it breaks down. All the wave action, it breaks down into microscopic particles that you can't even see, you know, nanoparticles, but they persist and they persist and they persist and they're around. And they are in our food. You know, they are, you know, all of us have a certain amount of plastic in our bodies because of these microplastics.
Yes.
And you know, that's a kind of really it's kind of I kind of think of it like it's, you know, there's plastics and there's climate. These are problems that are like deeply embedded in it. There's not a quick answer. You know, even if you suddenly stopped plastic production today, those microplastics will persist for 1,000 years. And you know, climate, if everybody suddenly, if there was some miracle and they suddenly worked out, you know, nuclear fusion and fission, whichever one it is, produce you know, carbon-free energy for free forever, there's still a kind of a lag in terms of, you know, being able to turn things around. And I think, yeah, plastics is just one of those problems that's almost, it's kind of unmanageable when you think about it. And that's one of the things that I've been really interested in on the kind of psychology side of things, is like when you present problems like this, which just seem like, you know, how do we deal with this? Then it's not very appealing for people. You know, you tend to think you tend to think, oh God, there's nothing I can do about this thing, so I'm just going to like run and hide and put my head in the sand, because it's so difficult to kind of get your head around it.
Absolutely.
And there was a lot of time with plastic, and even when we were doing stuff, when it was like, it was all about personal behaviors. It was all about, you know, you stop using a cup, you stop using your bottle. But really, it needs systemic change. It needs, you know, it needs governments, businesses, industries, all of them to shift. And then we as participants can do what we can do. But, you know, me using this instead of plastic bottles.
No, I mean, I completely, you know, like,
it's scratching the surface.
Right. Yeah. To your point, like 15 years ago, I worked for KQED, which is like PBS, you know, station out here. And one of my coworkers, she would every day buy a water bottle. Sorry, my dog is acting out. Anyway, she would buy a water bottle, and I think for a good couple of weeks, I was just like, what are you doing? I was like, so every day you're spending money on a plastic bottle, you're throwing it in the garbage. I said, you're one of like 1,000 people at work at KQED, one building in San Francisco. I said, I need you to think of it this way. If everyone in here buys a water bottle every day, like you're doing, and that's just us, think about the building next door. Think about all the buildings in San Francisco. Think about all the buildings in the Bay Area. We haven't even left our zip code. You realize how many water bottles are being used and thrown away every single day, when you can literally just buy one stainless steel water bottle and refill it. And she was like, I've never thought about that. And I was like, a lot of people haven't, but you know, that's how, you know, scratching the surface, we start being sustainable. And I was able to convince one person to stop buying water bottles.
Yeah.
It's one of those.
She'll tell someone else, and they'll tell someone else. Yeah.
Right. But I was just like, to me, 15 years ago, it's crystal clear. Don't buy water bottles, but it's not crystal clear for a lot of people. And that's like that education, that psychology you're speaking of, is how do we get them to kind of understand, yes, what you're doing is minimum. Like I even have a friend who, she lived in Texas, and she was like, I don't recycle. It's too much work. And, and I would be like, you need to, but it took her kids going to school, and it's like, you're hurting Earth. She's like, okay, now I'll recycle. And I was just like,
yeah.
I didn't that.
Here's one. Here's an example of the psychology thing, right? So, one way to change behavior like that is to like give people, because like you're saying, think about this, think about this, think about all. And so and some people will go, yeah, I'm with you, I get it. And other people will just go, whatever.
Mhm.
But another way to change people's behavior like that is like becoming a normal behavior. Like now we're in a position where it's almost everybody carries a water bottle around, and then it's just a normal thing to do. And so there's so many examples where kind of this is a psychological thing like norming, and I'm really interested in it. And one example of this of where it happens is, you see sometimes like there's a sidewalk here, and there's a sidewalk here, and there's a patch of grass here, and obviously you're supposed to walk down the sidewalk, turn left, and walk down the sidewalk, and then you see across the patch of grass, you just see like a piece of like a dirt track where people have
Yep.
just got to cut the corner. Well, somebody was the first one to do that, right?
Right.
So until somebody did that, everyone was following the rules and doing that. But then someone walked across, and the next person went, "Oh look, there are footsteps in the grass there. I can do that too." And then the more and more it gets worn out, the more and more people use it. It's called a desire line, and it's just a great example of like how we do what other people do. And then so if you can model positive behaviors, if you can just get things to the point where it just becomes what everyone does, then you can then things change, and things change really rapidly. Electric cars, look how quickly like electric cars have just like got boom, and they were so rare 10 years ago, and now
Right.
they're everywhere, particularly in California.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I think that norming is a really powerful tool, and you can kind of use that to your advantage if you're trying to create change.
Absolutely, absolutely. Be the change you want to see. I forgot who said
Yeah.
that, but yes, absolutely. Be that change. And then hopefully people will start to follow suit, so to speak, and keep doing what needs to be done. And yes, it seems like it's the bare minimum, and okay, my little person doing it is not going to change. That's what I've heard. And it's like, but yeah, if you start, someone else's start, your kids start, things like that, people, it becomes a tumble and everyone starts to do the right thing, hopefully. Right. But
There's a great YouTube video with a bunch of people. I can't remember what it's called. There's basically a bunch of people standing around, and one guy just starts dancing like crazy. And to start with, everyone's just like, "What is going on? Why is this guy just dancing?" And then another person starts dancing with him, and gradually the whole crowd just start dancing, just because this guy has been like the innovator. This guy's been the original that started the process. And I love that as a kind of a metaphor for how we create, how we can kind of create change. Don't be
yeah,
afraid to be the dancer.
exactly. I love that. Don't be afraid to be the dancer. Just, you start. I mean, I'm definitely I think I've influenced a few people to go ahead and just start doing the reusable water bottles over the years.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing more and more people doing it, which is amazing. So, but anyways, we'll get back to you because again, those are rabbit holes I
Yeah,
can
sorry about
definitely
that. I keep
dive
dragging
down
it off course.
It's okay. I love the fact that you, like we were talking before I went live, and I love your shark Christmas sweater, which is super cool with all the different types of sharks. By the
Oh yeah.
way, my favorite shark is the whale shark. I love the whale shark. I love how big it is, but yet it only eats small things. And like one of my bucket lists is to be able to learn to deep sea scuba dive and scuba dive with whale sharks. That is my bucket list. But what is your favorite shark?
I get asked this a lot, and I change my mind all the time because there are so many cool sharks out there.
Mm-hmm.
I guess so. Can I have two?
Sure. Yeah.
So one is the blue shark, and the
Mm.
blue shark's super cool because they're just beautiful. They're just like sleek, skinny little sharks. They've got these puppy eyes, and they're very inquisitive because they're open ocean sharks. They do these massive migrations around the ocean, and because of that, they spend a lot of time in just like open blue water. So anything that's there, they're like, "What's that?" So if you're in the water where blue sharks are around, they're very inquisitive. They'll come and take a look at you. But I think they're also cool because for me, they kind of, because they do these massive migrations and because they move in and out of the waters of different countries as they migrate, and they move from international waters to national waters and different nations and so on, they just really kind of tell the story of how difficult it is for their, to look after animals like this, and how difficult and how important it is for international collaboration, because it's no good one nation being really good at conservation if he just swims into another nation's waters and they're not so good. So that they kind of tell that whole like one ocean story, like we have one ocean and we all share it. And so that, to me, is like, that's why I think they're pretty iconic. But the other shark that's really cool is the Greenland shark. Have you come across the Greenland shark?
Yes, I have. I've heard of the Greenland shark.
So the Greenland shark is pretty wild. Like, they're quite big, and they live in very deep, dark, cold Arctic waters.
And they can live to be like really old, right?
400 years old.
Yeah,
they can live to 400 years, and that was only found out 10 years ago. And
wow,
that's kind of what I love about marine biology. And anyone who's thinking, I want to be a marine biologist, the best thing about marine biology is there's so much we don't know. And so there's so much to learn, and the new discoveries are just like there all the time. And so they only, about 10 years ago, they finally worked out how this, and the whole story of how they found it out is amazing, but I won't go into that because we haven't got long. But they're really slow. They're like incredibly slow. They kind of swim at the speed of a crawling toddler, and yet the animals that they catch, their prey list is incredible. Like they're scavengers, so they'll just kind of prey on anything that falls. You've had incidents of polar bears, Arctic foxes, seals, fish, squid. They'll just have anything, but they're just this kind of slow, lumbering creature, but then lives for 400 years. They're just amazing.
Yeah. I have a 5-year-old, but I think when he turned 3, he got a gift with all these plastic sharks. I think it was six in total, or 8 in total, and they had all these descriptions. Greenland shark wasn't one of them, but I still, we talked about sharks and all this stuff over the last 2 years, and I came across the Greenland shark, and it was like, oh, they live for so long, and don't they go blind at some point too? But they're just, like you said, scavengers.
Yeah, they have like a copepod thing, like a little animal that lives on their eye, and then they lose their vision as well. So again, they can't see. They're really slow, and they live forever. And yet, just these amazing predators.
Right. That's super cool. That's super cool. I don't think a lot of people hear about that shark, but as a self-proclaimed super nerd, I hear about all kinds of things. I read about all kinds of things.
Well, here's a job for you then, CaT, super nerd. Go and find out how they worked out how to age Greenland sharks. It's really interesting. It's a really interesting study.
Okay, I will.
That's your homework for today.
And I will do it. I will look into it. Okay, we are almost out of time. I got 2 more questions for you.
Cool.
One is, what would you tell your 10-year-old self? What advice would you give your 10-year-old self?
Ooh. Probably like, chill, stop worrying about stuff. It'll all work out okay.
Yeah.
I don't think I was a particularly confident 10-year-old, and I could never, if you'd said, you're going to be doing this amazing job working with sharks and talking to hundreds of people at a time, and people would actually listen to you, I would never have thought that could happen when I was 10. So I think I'd just say, relax, it's all going to be all right, and just enjoy the ride.
I love that. I love that. And then, so my last question is, what would you like people to take away from Shark Trust, from you, or what would you want them to know about you and or Shark Trust?
Well, I think, you know, for me, like the whole thing about sharks and the whole message I want to get across about sharks is about their diversity. Is about, you know, sometimes when people think of sharks, they have a, you know, you kind of close in on a particular vision of a shark, and you know, people think about the white shark and so on. And I think just learn when you start to learn about the diversity. You know, you talked about the whale shark, biggest fish in the sea, which is, you know, 15 meters long. There's also a shark that's that big that, you know, like fit in your pocket, and everything in between. There are, you know, sharks that hang around in schools. There are sharks that lie under rocks. There are sharks that are camouflaged. There's a shark that can walk with its pectoral fins. You know, there's so much diversity in the group, and I think once you start to kind of learn about the different sizes of sharks, it just kind of brings you into their world, and then, you know, find a friend and tell them all about sharks. That's, you know, that's what I just want everyone talking about them and loving them. That's my goal.
Okay, I love that. Well, thank you for spending my morning, your evening with me talking about sharks and
My
the work
pleasure.
that you do. If anyone wants to know more, I'm going to copy the link and put it in the chat about sharks, which is sharktrust.org. And thank you for
Check
everyone
out
who
the
watched.
YouTube channel as well. It's quite a lot of great content on our YouTube channel, so check that out.
And they have a podcast too. So make sure you check
We
out their
do.
podcast as
We
well.
do.
Yes. All right. For anyone live, thank you. For anyone listening to this later, appreciate it. If you ever have questions or know someone who wants to be on the podcast, send me a message.